waiting. I didn't realize I had to bring my own laptop, so I had to run downstairs and get that. I wanted to kind of spend some time today with you to share with you what we're, as a company, what we're doing in the auto industry, and also some of the interesting things that we are actually seeing happening in the industry as well, especially from a software perspective. My name is Sean Lee. I work for a company called Pivotal Software. If you are following some of our news recently, or at least in the automotive industry, we actually had our latest Series C funding from Ford, which is obviously one of the largest auto manufacturers in the world, investing into the company. And I'll explain a little bit about why they decided to do so. But before I do that then, I just want to do a quick show of hands. How many of you have heard of our company? One, thank you. Thank you all. I expected you guys too. Okay, so maybe I'll in just a bit, I'll explain about what we do. But let me just go through a little bit about what is actually happening in the industry and why some of these companies like Ford and Daimler and BMW and all of those are actually working with us. So if you think about the auto industry, I don't know if you've seen this slide before. This is actually a manufacturing line or a production line in a Ford, right, about 100 years ago. This picture was taken a very long time ago. And if you think about what companies like Ford were doing at the time, you know, most of the car companies at that moment were basically, you know, making a part, you know, a car at a time. So a whole team will converge and they will make one car. And then the team will go to the next one and make another car. It wasn't until Henry Ford decided that, you know, some resemblance of a production line, so people were working on the same components, that will dramatically speed up a lot of the processes, and that revolutionized the car industry, right? And of course today, most of the car you know, factories that you go into, you will see something like this. Now the interesting thing here is obviously everything's all automated now, right? And I was told that they can literally go from sheer metal to a finished car in 18 hours. 18 hours these days, right? It's not taking weeks or months. It's taking 18 hours to actually make a car. Everything's all automated, right? So you see robotic arms doing everything. What you don't see here now are people. Where are the people? There's no one standing there anymore, right? Now there's some operators and managers that are still on the floor, but the fact of the matter is a lot of these are now driven by software, right? People are writing the software to control what these robots are doing in terms of the design and the entire process of making the car. So the car industry the auto industry have really gone a very, very long way, right? From 100 years ago, from what you saw from that black and white picture, towards what we will see mostly now in most factories. But the interesting thing here is if you think about the auto industry and where it is going, that is not where it is going. Where it is going is that a lot of the car companies now don't exactly look at each other as their core competitors. Because when you go to Google or you go to, you know, whichever search engine that you do, and you search on things like car innovations and auto innovation and so on, you get companies like Google, you get companies like Apple, and if you're in China, you get companies like Baidu that are all talking about them going into the auto industries, them going into self-driving or autonomous driving. These technology companies are now heavily going into the auto industry. And they're looking at it slightly differently, right? They're not looking at it from the perspective of making the car. They're looking at it from a perspective of how do they leverage the hardware, wherever it is, whatever it is, and use software and use sensor technology and IoT to make the car more like an everyday item, a mobile device that you extend perhaps from your phone all the way into the driving experience. In fact, if you think about it, you know, in a short few years, you know, I used to think that the year 2020 is really far away until you look at your phone and you look at the calendar and you realize 2020 is 3 years away, right? 3.5 years away. So in 2020, your car could potentially look like this, right? The drivetrain, you know, Tesla is doing a lot of work in those areas, and other car companies as well, but they're very well known in that space. In terms of the hub experience, it's companies like Apple that are really controlling that experience, and we know that, right? We see it in the news all the time. And then you look at Google, right? Google literally, our headquarters is in San Francisco, and you very constantly see these Google cars that are coming in and out, and sometimes it's a little scary because there's no one in the driving seat. So you're looking at it thinking, wow, is that really safe, right? But that's what a lot of companies are doing now in that space. And then of course, from an access perspective, Uber now is everywhere, right? Uber's everywhere. Every city that I go to, I'm more or less, except for here in Tokyo, I'm more or less an Uber user. I don't take taxis anymore. So if you really think about the car, we have to think about the car very, very differently now. Our car is basically, if you think about it, computer running on 4 wheels. It's a computer running on 4 wheels. And if you talk to Tesla, they'll say it's a computer running on 4 wheels with a bunch of batteries, right? So the way you think about the car is very, very different than how we've always interacted with a car. So there are a lot of disruptions that are happening in the auto industry, right? Just based on what I shared with you in a little bit. In fact, I talked about this earlier. You know, Google and Apple doing a lot of work in those areas, working on the software that controls the car, working on the software that accesses a lot of the sensors that are basically everywhere within the car, making sense of it, and driving the user experience as you interact with the car. So if you think about the auto companies, traditional auto companies, what are they thinking? Well, this is what Ford is thinking, right? And you know, this is you know, what they're saying is, look, the car industry is changing. They realize it too, right? They all know it. So if they are changing, and it is primarily because of digital disruptions that are happening in that industry, or not just that industry, but across the technology industry, then they have to adapt. And they have to really learn how to compete with the new competitors in the auto industry, like the Google and Baidu's and Apple. And they have to really change the mentality in terms of how they go to business as well. So let me share some examples with you. Hopefully that will bring it into more of a context in regards to what we're doing. Now, before I do that though, I have a little chart over here that shows that a lot of the car companies obviously are already going down that path, right? So you look at Toyota and GM and Ford and Fiat, Chrysler, and so on. There have been a lot of investments being put into these areas. Everybody is trying to get to that point, right? Everyone's saying, hey, I don't want, what does Google and Apple know about cars? We know about cars. So we need to use our domain knowledge, but add on these new things that we don't know so that we can compete effectively and we can disrupt the disruptors, being Google and Apple, right? So a lot of companies are already going down that path, and you see a lot of these investments, right? Why would a car company invest in ride sharing? Right? Well, that doesn't even make sense. They're trying to sell cars. But if people are sharing, they're not buying as many cars. Does that make sense? Well, it does. And I'll explain that a little bit. Mapping technologies and autonomous driving and so on and so forth. So you can see the investment. Now, this is just the initial phases, right? The next wave, the third wave, the fourth wave, you're going to see more and more investment in these areas, including an investment that they just made in a company like ours. And again, I'll explain to you in a bit why we do so. So why is software so important to the auto industry? Well, because as all of us know, right, we are a digital generation. I don't care what age you're at, we're a digital generation. Everything we do now is through some sort of digital channel, and increasingly more on the mobile side, right? I think we all realize that. And a car is really, sometimes if you think about it, it's just an extension of that experience, right? So they need to learn how do they use mobile consumer technology? How do they incorporate that into the car? How do they extend that experience from the phone into the car and back? They also have to look at things like this. There are millions of vehicles out there, right? And a lot of passengers and a lot of driving hours. That's a lot of behavioral analysis that they can now actually incorporate into how they design the car, but also how they design the experience. If you think about how cars have been designed, it's always been around the horsepower, torque, a lot of the physical engineering aspects of it. But now they have to start thinking, well, that's important, but the experience is just as important in some cases, if not more important. So how would they be able to do that? And then there are things like machine learning, right? Autonomous driving. If If you really think about a car being basically, knowing exactly what to do, there is a lot of logic that needs to go into that car, go into that computer that's running on four wheels. And all of these things have to be learned, right? Why do you think the Google car have been on the road for so many, hundreds and thousands or millions of miles, right? Because they need to learn the behavior, right? They need to learn exactly what are some of the consequences that may happen so that they can anticipate and potentially replace a physical human driver at some point, right? We're not there yet, but at some point. So let me share with you a couple examples of companies that we are working with and the type of things that we're doing with them. Now again, Pivotal is not an auto manufacturing company. We're a software company. We are a software services company as well. So these examples over here does not mean that we are building a connected car with Daimler. We're not doing that. We're working with them on their quest to do that, right? We are also working with BMW on some of their, analytics, data science, and eventually self-driving projects as well, and so on and so forth. So let me go into that. So when we talk about the connected car, everybody talks about the connected car. They talk about connecting everything in the car, right? There are lots and lots of things in the car. Connecting it is very important, obviously, right? Because you get so much data that's coming from all aspects of how the car is working, whether the car is moving or not. There's so much information coming out of it. And I'm sure a lot of the companies are already putting a lot of effort into understanding what that means. But have you thought about something as well? Once you get all that information, how do you actually make use of it? Make use of it not for the auto company. Make use of it for the driver. If I'm driving that car and you're giving me a lot of information, how do I access it? Do I access it through the dashboard? Do I access it on my phone? Is it voice activated? Are there things that can be done automatically? That is what the connected car is all about, right? It's not just connecting all the sensors and IoT stuff. It is doing that, but there has to be some application to it. And that application has to be user-centric, right? Because otherwise, you won't even know it's happening. Now, some of it you don't want to know, you don't need to know, but some of it you do want to know. You want to kind of have control over that. So the project that we did with Daimler, and this is an ongoing project we've done, we have a very long, very strategic partnership with Daimler. Anyone here drives a Mercedes-Benz? Yeah, a few of you. Others don't want to put up your hand. It's okay. It's okay. I know we're in Japan, but I see Mercedes on the road as well. So this is the Mercedes Me connected car app. Now, what you see here is just the app. Obviously, there's a lot of integrations and back-end services that are tied to it. But this app, obviously, it's available on iOS and Android. What Daimler wanted to do was saying, hey, we want to know what the users are doing and using the car for. I want to know, how much do they really want to control it on the phone and interact with the onboard computing system within the car. They want to understand that. Now, if you think about most auto companies, think about your Toyotas, think about your Ford, Mercedes, BMW. They don't typically work with you directly as a driver, as a user, as a buyer, right? There's this thing called the dealership network in the middle, right? They deal with the dealership network, dealers sell the car to you. You don't actually deal with them directly. They don't usually have instantaneous real-time information about how their users are using their product. Just think about that for a second, right? If you think about companies like Apple and Google and so on, they know exactly what the users are doing. So by creating applications like these, by companies like Daimler and others, they now have direct feedback in terms of what their users are doing. Now, it's not a one-time thing, right? They will need to continue to enhance the functionality, learn from the experience, learn from the behavior, continue to build new things so that the user can actually make use of the drivers, right? And the passengers can actually make use of that information. That's the first step that Daimler wanted to take in their connected car journey. They're doing a lot in the back end, building services, connections, systems, and so on. But they're also working on the front end as well. Now, if you think about it though, a company like Daimler, and they're a car company, they're not Google and Apple. Do they really know how to do stuff like this? Now, a lot of companies will say, okay, well, I'm just going to outsource it. I'm going to go find some app company to build it for me, and we're going to integrate it. And of course, that app company is just going to take the same thing that they just built for you and they're going to sell it to somebody else, right? That's just the reality. That's how things work. So companies now are saying, hey, we need to learn how to do this. We need to continuously understand what our users are doing. And if that needs to happen, we need to build on ourselves. But we don't know how to. That's what Daimler told us. So the way we work with them is actually we co-develop that product with them. We did not build it for them. We develop it with them. That's a very key point. That's how we do things. We develop the product with our customers. We develop it with them because they understand their product and where they want to go, and we understand how to build modern software. How do we do analytics? We know these things. That's how we partner together. So it's a very new approach of software development on partnership, on collaboration, on openness, on using open source technology, right? That's the new approach that a lot of these companies, especially ones that are working with us, are going down the path now. And just to show you a couple pictures on how we work with them. So the picture on the top left-hand side, that's our office in San Francisco. We have this lab environment where we invite our customers to come. They bring their project team, they bring their designers, we pair with them to go develop these things. Now, of course, we're developing a connected car app. So you need the car somewhere to be there because you need to be testing it at all times. You need to be refining the interaction with the car. So they brought their cars in and we pair with their engineers and their designers and their product owners so we can come up with the product that the users will actually like to use. Think about the typical software development lifecycle, right? You will get some requirement from your business unit. You will get, business unit will come up with these functional requirement documents, very, very long documents. And then they'll pass it over onto IT. IT will then go find a vendor. They'll go through an RFP process. It's 6 months before you even start developing the software. Anyone gone through that process before? Right? You don't want to tell me, but that's okay. That's how most software development life cycles are. And then of course the development life cycle takes another 6 months or 9 months. So before you get the product out in the user's hand, it's a year down the road. We all know how fast the industry is moving, especially with mobile and consumer-based technology. If you deliver that product based on requirements that you gathered a year ago, I'm sorry, you're going to be behind. So the way we do it, not only are we pairing and teaching and coaching at the same time, we're interacting with the user at all times. We want to know exactly what they want. We want to refine it along the way. We want to be doing surveys. We want to be doing demos and prototyping. That's what we're teaching these companies to do. So when the product is actually out the door, we know it's going to get 5-star in the Apple Store. We know it's going to get 5-star in the Google Play Store. Because who's actually rating these apps? The users. Well, we got the users. The users have been designing with us along the way. That's a very different way of thinking, a very, very different way of doing things. And that's what we're very, very proud of. Just to give you some quote on the head of their connected car division, they talk about how they reduce their innovation cycles, right? How they're able to respond very quickly to the changing market demand, the user demands, right? Behavioral analysis, and be able to develop it and learn this process. This is not a one-time project. They intend to do this on every project that they will do moving forward. Right? So that's very, very important. So this is just one example of what we are doing with Daimler Mercedes. Let me talk a little bit about the work we're doing with BMW. And by the way, all of these you can pretty much go Google and say BMW Pivotal, and you'll find some information on there. So we're not building the self-driving system with BMW, right? We're not in the business of doing that. And the reality is, we all want the self-driving, autonomous driving experience to be like this, right? You sit in a car, you can do whatever you want to do. And then it'll take you from point A to point B and you're done. And we all want that to happen. But we're not there yet, right? We're not there yet. The technology has not matured enough to go to that point. But we're taking steps along the way. When I say we, I'm saying the human race. I'm not talking about our company, right? We are getting there. So autonomous driving really need to come in small doses, right? One small thing at a time. The more experience, the more insight you gain, you add on top of that, and then eventually at some point, we will get to a point where you will have completely autonomous driving. That's not an easy thing to do, if you think about it. Those of you that are software engineers that are building embedded systems and whatnot in the car, you realize a car, even though you see the physical hardware, there are millions of lines of code that controls that car. Right? Millions of lines of code controls that car. And that's just the car. If you think about autonomous driving now, you're interacting with not just your car, but all the other cars that are on the road as well. You need to figure out the distance. Where are they? Which lane? Big car, small car? Are there people in there? Are you taking off ramp? There are a lot of variations. Traffic, weather, right? You need to take all of those into consideration. So if the car has millions of lines of code already, and now you need to interact with the rest of the cars that are happening out there, think about how much software needs to be written to understand how that is done. How much analysis and how much data you need to collect in order for that to happen. So I talked about small doses, right? You can't get there on day one, in one step. So what about doing things like learning the road conditions? Can you take information from the public domain, but also from the car? When the cars are driving, there are sensors. Can the sensors be gathering information about the road, about the conditions, about traffic? And be able to send that into a central hub so they can then be distributed back into the overall population so they know exactly what's happening. Well, that's important, right? Also need to react to the reaction. Right? A car is pulling in front of you and they're making a left, cutting into your lane. You need to understand what that means. The car needs to understand what that means. And some people cut in very quickly, some people actually signal and then they come in. So you need to understand what that means. The car needs to be able to see and do what we do with our eyes, with our brain. That takes time to learn. Small doses, projects by projects, function by function, component by component. That's what these companies are doing now. So what we've done is we've worked with them. We try to understand the steps that they want to take. Every company is doing things a little bit differently. And this is actually our own demo. So we were building a demo here, trying to anticipate, if you're going from one location, well, can the car actually anticipate where you want to go? And bring that information in conjunction with fuel economy, right? How much fuel do you actually have? Now, whether this is particularly relevant if you're driving electric cars or hybrid cars, right? Because you need to understand you have enough battery power to actually go to the point that you want to go. So are there things that the car can learn and feedback, and based on historical tracking of the transactions, as well as in anticipation of what the driver is actually doing, and be able to predict where these things are. All of these are going to go into those small doses, those small functional components that will go towards a point at some point where they'll be able to completely autonomous the driving experience. So this is just very high level architecture, what we're doing in that space, right? We need to understand whether it's a mobile app or some sort of sensor on the car, we need to be able to stream that information in. We need to understand in real time what's actually happening out on the road and also in the car. We need to store that information. We need to be able to see a historical trend around how some of these reactions are actually happening. We need to be able to create some dashboard environments that the user, the operators, can actually tweak the system along the way and continue to inject more functionality in there. And then this is the closed loop circle, right? You need to continue to do this back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. And at the same time, you need to expose that into some sort of application so the driver, the user, can actually use it, which is very similar to what we talked about earlier in the Daimler example. So that's on very high level of what we're doing with companies like BMW in terms of understanding their data, understanding what they're doing with it in anticipation of what is to come later on. Let me share with you one more example, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail on the company. So you might be thinking, right, why are car companies doing car sharing? That almost go against the rule, right? If you think about every car company, how they're measured. I used to live in the US and I see these car commercials and they'll always tell you, the J.D. Power associate and who's number one and so on and so forth, right? And what is that usually measured by? The number of vehicles that they push out the door, right? That's been going on for decades of how that's being measured. But is that really the only measuring stick moving forward? Maybe not, right? Why is Uber valued so much in terms of market cap, more than these car companies in some cases? There's some reasoning to that. So car sharing is, I think as we all know, it's becoming a very big deal, right? Uber Uber is now in, I think, 200 or almost 300 countries in the world, right? The car sharing is a big deal. Now, what car sharing really means is a lot of people are buying less cars, right? I live in Hong Kong now, and very small city, very dense city, just like Tokyo here. I just spent, won't tell you exactly how much I spent, but I'll tell you my parking space, very small parking space, costs more than a 4-bedroom house that I have in the United States. Parking space costs more than my 4-bedroom house in the United States. Okay, now, it's not a mansion what I have. Very costly. But I'll tell you, I have that parking space, but I don't have a car. Right? I see that parking space as real estate. That's an investment for me. I use Uber everywhere I go in Hong Kong. Now, I'm not 25 years old. Right? I am not this, X, Y, Z generation. I'm not that young. But I am using Uber. So if you think about the younger generation and their acceptance to new technology, more and more people are going to be going down this route. Car companies know this, right? Car companies know this. I had a Japanese car. I had a German car. I don't have a car anymore because I don't really need one. In fact, I'll tell you, I think I was telling someone yesterday, about 40% of the cars that come to pick me up in Hong Kong, and I use Uber X. You know what that is, right? That's just a normal kind of rate. 40% of the time it's actually Tesla coming to pick me up. A Tesla coming to pick me up. So I want to sit in fancy cars. I don't need to buy one. I just need to go order one, right? So car sharing is a big deal, right? So companies like Ford are saying, hey, if that's the case, and we can't force people to buy cars, well, but at least if they're going somewhere from a mobility perspective, they should be sitting in a Ford car, right? They should be using Ford services. In fact, if they're really in the transportation, mobility business, can they offer that as a service? Can they take people to go buy grocery? Can they take people to go watch a movie in the Ford car? They don't have to buy the Ford car, but they can be sitting in one. They can experience everything that Ford has to offer. Now that's a very different way of thinking. Very, very different way of thinking. So we co-developed this new application, this new entire platform called Ford Pass. Again, go Google it. These are all public information, right? So what they're doing now is they're offering these capabilities. So things like Ford Marketplace, right, offering different mobility services, sharing and so on. Ford Guides, telling you how to go to different places, navigations and mapping technology. Ford Appreciations, then you can collect points, as you are using these services. Ford Pay, Ford is actually in the payment business as well, right? Not just Apple Pay, not just Google and so on. They are also in the payment space. Why? Because if they're offering a service to you, you need to pay them somehow. Well, they might as well take advantage of that as well. So all of these things really have nothing to do with how much horsepower is sitting in a particular Ford car. These are all services that are touching the user, but using Ford technology, right? So the previous slide that you saw earlier about them saying, hey, we need to embrace digital technology, they are really embracing digital technology. And so obviously we are the engine behind Ford Pass, and this is their comment in terms of what they're doing, right? They are making it easier for the consumer, whether they own a Ford vehicle or not. You can read the rest of it later on. But this is a very drastic way of thinking for an auto manufacturer. Whether you own the vehicle or not, you can still be using their service. Now, they're doing it because they now realize software is a core differentiator. It's not just the hardware. Right? This is the head of their connected vehicle division, Don Butler. He says in the past, 90% of the car values was in the hardware. Now they expect 50% of the value will be in the hardware and 50% will be in the software moving forward. It's not just all the hardware. Right? Software is very, very important, especially ones that are connecting to the users. So what are they doing? They're bringing software development in-house. They used to outsource a lot too. They're bringing a lot of that in-house. Right? They are trying to learn how to do it themselves. They try to learn how to be an internet company. That's a drastic, interesting idea. Right? They're trying to learn how to do that. In fact, of course, how they're learning to do it, these are actually engineers from Ford sitting with our engineers in our Toronto lab office, where they are co-developing Ford Pass, whatever that you saw earlier on the previous slide. These are folks that are literally working together, pairing with each other, learning along the way. We are learning how they're doing it, what they're trying to design, they're learning our methodology. It's a win-win situation for Ford as well as Pivotal. right? We love these type of partnership. I guess they love it so much that Ford decided that it's a worthwhile investment that they would invest into Pivotal. Right? So a couple months ago, they invested, I think it says 182 million, right, into our company as our Series C. Right? So that's very big news for us. That is a validation, not just as a technology company, but a company that can help traditional enterprises, traditional industries transform in the age of digital disruptions that we're all seeing today. So, I talk about 3 examples. I talk a little bit about where the car industry is going. I think we all agree that this is what we see in the news all the time anyways. Has that been interesting so far? Are these things that you already know? You just see me up here talking? Yeah? Interesting? Can I get some nods? Yeah? Okay. I know I'm in Japan, so I don't expect people to be like yelling and screaming with questions, but that's okay. So let me tell you a little bit about what we do. Right? Why are we doing these interesting projects with these large car companies? So we are actually a young company, but we're also a very old company. That's a little weird. But we're a young company because we were incorporated as a company 3.5 years ago. But our subsidiaries, the companies that we use to form Pivotal, have been around a very long time, since the 90s, as you can see on this chart. And earlier on in our incarnation, what were we doing? We weren't working with Ford, right? We weren't working with Daimler. We weren't even working with JP Morgan or these large banks that we have as customers now. We were working with internet companies, Silicon Valley companies. We were actually part of Google's development team, right? A small part. We were working with eBay. We were working with Tesla, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I don't have all the Uber. I don't have all the names here, but these are the companies we were working with. So because of that credential, companies that now you see on the right-hand side, they are now asking us to say, hey, the stuff that you were doing with these internet companies, we want to learn that. We want to learn the Silicon Valley way of doing things. We need to know how to develop software just like these companies. They're highly iterative, highly user-driven, because we don't know how to do so. We need to learn. Can we do it together? That's why we're working with them now. That's the history of what we've done. And the way we do it is basically very simple, right? There's a modern software development methodology that we share with our customer, and we provide a cloud platform. Now, why is that important? We're not AWS, right? We're not Azure, we're not Google Cloud Compute, so we're not in that space. What we do is we allow companies to develop applications that can live on any cloud infrastructure. Why is that important? Because if you spend less time as an IT technology organization trying to figure out the infrastructure and the networking and the storage and the compute and all of that stuff, where you can just use that as a service, but your technology team focuses on building value through applications and services and data that can service your customer, then you win. Why do things that have less value? Right? There are companies very, very good at doing it, user service. But focus, this is what we call the value line, right? Focus on building the application that actually have broad value towards your user. That's why the modern cloud platform is actually pretty important. So we combine these things, right? So our cloud platform is a technology called Pivotal Cloud Foundry. Some of you that are sitting in the LinuxCon or ContainerCon or some of the keynote yesterday, you probably heard about the Cloud Foundry Foundation. That was a technology that VMware incubated a few years ago. We have taken, we are the major contributor into that technology. We're a co-founder of the Cloud Foundry Foundation. This is our own distribution with some unique functionality that we have on top, especially, and then on top, obviously, our enterprise support. So this technology empowers companies with choice, right? You can use any of these cloud-based technologies. It doesn't really matter, but what you develop is not tied into that technology, that infrastructure. The applications and the services that you develop sitting on top of Cloud Foundry can run on any of them. Private cloud, public cloud, hybrid cloud, on-premise, off-premise. It all works with the technology. So that's a very, very key aspect of it. But then at the same time, you think about having the cloud platform. Well, that's great. That's from a technology platform perspective. Well, you also need to know how to actually use it, and how your team needs to be structured, how your team needs to building these software. These internet companies don't have 200, 300 man project teams. They are very small teams. right? But traditional companies have these large development teams. I know because I used to be an app developer, right? Building things for the banks, not in the auto industry. Our teams are huge. Right? Everybody have one little functionality and everybody just do that. But companies like the modern companies now don't do that, right? They have very small teams, everybody owns that components, and then they continue to roll on. So you need to understand the methodology. You need to understand this notion of lean startup, right? What does it actually mean? How do you